Well, hello. It's Kyle Chambers, CEO, founder of Texas Quality Assurance. We're doing another installment from our QMS Bootcamp series of trainings. Today, we are digging a little bit into what I know everyone that's watching this has had to deal with at least once, and that is your internal audit. There are so many requirements for auditing, and yet at the same time, so few. And we'll kind of dig into that a little bit deeper as we go here. But the internal audit, whether you're conducting a self-audit, you're getting prepared to be audited by even an external organization, you're outsourcing your internal audit, or even some combination of both. It's going to be a great video, lots of good information for you. And, we'll just kind of dig in here in just a minute. So I want to show you a little bit about what this particular training comes from. So we have a full internal auditor training course that we've conducted before. So we're taking one segment from this course. So today is simply the introduction to the internal audit. We'll be adding a few more of the bootcamp videos here in the future, but today we're going to take a look specifically at the introduction to internal audit. So first, we really have to understand why in the world do we need to audit? Now, your first reaction is going to be, well, we have to. It's a requirement. Yes, this is true. But even then, the requirements vary greatly. So if you have your ISO 9001 or API Q1, AS 9100, whatever it is, there are requirements for your internal auditor. But go look at the standard, dig into it, open up to the clause for internal auditing. Really, the best it says is that your auditor needs to be competent to conduct the audit. Well, what on earth does competent to internal audit mean? So we'll talk about that a little bit. But other than the fact that you have to have an internal audit, well, the internal audit is a really great tool. What it's used for, first and foremost, is to verify your processes. And what are the processes you have? You might say, well, I don't know. We've got these procedures and manuals and whatnot. So we have another video that we can link in the show notes here. And that video is about conducting a gap assessment, specifically a process-based gap assessment. So if you're not real sure what your processes are, that's going to be a great way to get started. And it can just kind of be a fun, sprawling exercise. It's actually the first way that we engage with any new clients for any type of consultation or QMS development work is we begin with that process-based gap assessment so that we can identify your unique processes and how those are impacted by your requirements, your interested parties, and how you use those processes to get your desired output. So the next piece of an effective internal audit is we want to assess successful process implementation. So not only do we have the processes that are necessary for your organization, but how successfully are these implemented? So again, we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of process mapping, which, tons of content on here for process mapping. But a process map is identified by inputs being converted to outputs. So as we convert those inputs into outputs, we have certain controls in place. These are going to be your process procedures, maybe some of your forms. And then we're going to identify what's our goal and how do we check to verify that we converted our inputs into our outputs and met our initial goals. So another reason that conducting those process-based gap assessments, regardless where you are in the status of your quality management system, if you're 30 years in or looking to get certified this year, either way, today is a great day to do a process-based gap assessment. I promise it will add new insight into how you manage your organization, how you manage your quality management system. The next piece that the audit's good for is we've gone through to verify the processes are in place. You would be surprised every once in a while in an internal audit, we find that there are just pieces that have been neglected for a while. We judge the effectiveness of them. Are we achieving the desired outputs? And we want to judge the effectiveness of target levels. So not only are we getting our desired outputs, but each process can in its own right have its own KPIs. Now, KPI, key performance indicator, there's a number of varieties of terms for these. You can say, well, these are our metrics, these are our goals. Just these are the numbers we hope to achieve. One of my favorites, and I can't say this is my own idea, very much borrowing this idea from Dave Ramsey, the Entre Leadership courses, but his key success area. For this process, what are the key successes for this area? How are you going to measure success? So then we're going to take it even further. So we'll know that the process is implemented because we're not getting a lot of findings. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a good process. It just means it's not issuing non-conformances. So then we want to judge how effective these are. And again, it's done very much by going against the numbers, going against your stated goals. How do we measure success in the future? Let me tell you, if you're waiting on your external auditor to identify what success looks like, get ready to go down some weird rabbit holes because every auditor has their own opinions of these things. On the other hand, if you state explicitly, these are our success metrics for this process, and you can show you have achieved those success metrics, you have made life on everyone easier, not just yourself going through the audit, on your auditor, conducting it, on your management, addressing the effectiveness, and is it worth continuing to put resources in this area of the business? So especially right now, everyone is fighting for what few resources their company has to justify, their improvements or their projects or their plans in their department. If you have detailed, these are the key success areas from this process. This is what we hope to achieve. Here's the evidence that we are achieving it. You have just made it very difficult to have those budgets cut, and you've made it a very clear path forward for continued improvement. So great things can come from this. You want to reduce and eliminate problem areas. This is really one of the biggest reasons we do the audit, is we want to identify those areas that are causing us problems. Now, some of those problems are identified from obvious nonconformities from the audit. We failed to meet an objective. We failed to meet a customer requirement. These are all very good bits of information. But this one of the things that makes an internal audit a lot more fun than an external audit is in the internal audit, we can really ask some more probing questions. We can start to actually treat people like people and say, great, I see you're doing well here. You've reduced, your findings from last year. This is doing great. But what still gets in your way on a day-to-day basis? What's the most time-consuming part of your day? In getting me whatever report we're looking at here, what was the biggest holdup? What causes you the most problems that you have to internally correct before it gets to the final product? So these are, again, great opportunities to dig in further for continued improvement, to really find out what's going on with these folks. And it really just comes by treating people like people in this internal audit, which is, I understand, very much not your most touchy-feely part of the month. This isn't when you think about relationship building, but a proper internal audit really can be a fantastic tool for relationship building. Now, you might say, well, Kyle, I don't actually conduct the audit myself. In fact, I outsource it to you. Well, great. If you're outsourcing the internal audit to Texas Quality Assurance, you're outsourcing it to anyone else, whether it's another consulting company out there, whether it's, the head branch of your organization, whomever it might be. Shadow that auditor. And as that auditor's going through things, really work hard to understand the dilemma that your people are in and how they're facing their job, and really use this as an opportunity to build that relationship with folks, to build that true, genuine trust with them, that you really do have their back in this, and that you do want to assist and continue to move forward and continually improve, not for the sake of improvement, but for the sake of the organization, for the sake of their sanity in their job. It's a little known trick here. Happier employees tend to be more effective and more productive. Just crazy thought that makes folks might have heard of, but the audit's a great chance to do it, because this is so often one of our more adversarial type nature of activities we conduct. Break the mold. Let's have some fun with it. We want to report good practices. Good practices are key to report that internal audit. Let me tell you, the department that gets bragging rights at the end of the internal audit, that department manager will be remembered. That employee that had that idea, that made that innovation, these folks will be remembered. Even when there's findings in the audit, there's always good things that can come from it. So be sure to give credit where it's due. And none of this is really foreign to the ISO standard or any of these quality management standards to begin with. if we were to take a more fundamental look at the principles of quality management, and these are published, by ISO, these are out for everyone to see. This isn't just my idea. Is it starts with customer focus, which we understand. Whatever your organization is, whether you're a church or an oil and gas company, you have a customer and you're providing a service and a value to that customer. So customer focus has to be first. Then we're going to move into engagement of people and leadership. So these are the fundamental ideas at the very roots, at the very foundation of our quality management system, and they should not be neglected during that internal audit. And all of this is going to provide us opportunities for continual improvement. And I would argue, especially a no findings audit has vast opportunity for continual improvement. And if people are not sold on the value of continual improvement, on the value of flexibility and innovation after what we've just seen in 2020 and so far here in 2021, then I don't know it's going to convince anyone of the value of innovation and continual improvement. It's going to be those teams that are able to respond, flex, and adapt to these changes that are going to be the ones to really succeed here in the rest of the new year and to come. Now, with everything, there's definitions. All right. No, it's not the most exciting part of any of these lessons, but definitions are critical, folks, because if two people have a different understanding of a fundamental term, we can't have a conversation. And we want to have conversations. We want to talk with people like people, but that does mean we have to be on the same page here, literally and figuratively speaking. So let's talk about that briefly. What is an audit? Well, an audit is a if I can speak here, systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence, evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. Audit evidence. So this is what you collect through the audit. These are going to be the records, statements, facts, or other information. So audit evidence can come in a number of manners. Now, what we like the best is I have a document printed here, or I have a copy of an email, and it says we did this. The procedure says we were supposed to do that. This is either conforming or non-conforming. That's audit evidence. We're all familiar with that. Audit evidence, the objective evidence can also be, well, I had a conversation with someone, and in that conversation, it was stated that. Be very clear, precise in your language, but those employee interviews, those can also be objective evidence. Objective evidence can come in the form of a lack of evidence. We were unable to find information supporting and then list the requirement. Great source of evidence as well. You do want to avoid using words such as anything, nothing. Let's avoid those absolutes. Pretty much absolutely avoid them, because nothing is ever never. So maybe enough on that topic there. And we have audit criteria. Audit criteria, these are your policies, these are your procedures, requirements, other references against which the standards compared. So audit criteria is all of the various requirements that might come into play. You want to identify your audit team. One or more of the auditors are conducting an audit. Supported if needed by additional technical experts. A one auditor team is still a team, and that one auditor is then by default appointed the title of lead auditor. Now, while we're on the term of lead auditor, this is kind of a sticky term. Lead auditor can mean a lot of things to a lot of folks. So you want to make sure that your organization defines what lead auditor is and what the requirements for it are. Typically speaking, and this is one of my personal criteria for defining a lead auditor, is there someone who has achieved an auditor certification? We accept internally for our lead auditors at Texas Quality Assurance either an IRCA lead QMS auditor or a global exemplar QMS lead auditor. Now, what this means is that you have so many days of audit experience that can be verified if necessary, and you have taken a certified course, and you have passed a proctored exam. So all of these combined together with the reference of another lead auditor can get you your lead auditor certification. Is this the only method? No, there's other methods, other criteria for lead auditor, but internally we take this as a minimum requirement for lead auditor. So if you are outsourcing your audit, and you're choosing not to use Texas Quality Assurance, which is, beyond my understanding, but, people have other ideas. All seriousness, there's no shortage of good folks out there. So outsourcing an internal audit is really a fantastic way to get a fresh set of eyes, a different opinion, and an objective opinion on the audit. So you do want to check for the qualifications of their lead auditor. You want to make sure that your internal procedure matches with those stated requirements. I ran into a situation once where I was conducting the audit. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I was personally conducting the audit. I myself was an IRCA certified QMS lead auditor, and their process procedure stated global exemplar certified lead auditor. And even though it's effectively apples to apples comparison, we had a little bit of a problem because the way that they stated it internally caused a little bit of a dilemma. So these are just little minutia things to consider. One of the reasons that they're so important to consider is you don't want to invalidate your entire audit from the outset because of a technicality in the way that you wrote your process procedure. So just something to consider there. An audit finding. This is the result of an evaluation of collected evidence from the audit against other criteria. So an example of an audit finding could be this was conforming, this was non-conforming, perhaps an observation. Let's consider taking a look at this in more detail. Non-conformity, obviously something did not meet a specified requirement. And then auditee is just the person being audited. Now, before we dive too much into auditor responsibilities, only because I made the comment of observation. So when conducting an audit, you want to leave simple remarks about the audit findings. So the process was either conforming, it was non-conforming, there was a major non-conformity, which we'll discuss a little bit detail in the future, or there was an observation that might want to be reviewed. Let me stress, if this is an internal audit, observations are acceptable, oftentimes encouraged. You do not want the internal audit report to be full of observations, because at that point, your auditor is functioning more as the role of a consultant. Even if it's an internal consultant, they are functioning more as a consultant at that moment in time. But your auditor may have really unique, valuable insight that you want to pay attention to. On the other hand, if this is an external audit and you're getting observations, you seriously need to sit down and evaluate if this is the certifying body you want to work with. Might be worth a phone call to the folks, because those auditors are absolutely barred and banned from anything relating to or looking like consultation work. So just something else to kind of consider there. So auditor responsibilities. Now, for most small businesses, we use Texas Quality Assurance as an example. If we're going to conduct an internal audit for you, typically speaking, we will send a single auditor for your facility for anywhere from 1 to 5 days. So typically speaking, even with an outsourced second-party audit, the entire audit team oftentimes is a singular person. For larger facilities, different time constraints, or different expertise in the industry, team audits are very highly encouraged. But you do want to make certain that you still have someone defined as lead auditor. That does not mean, however, that the lead auditor on the audit team has to be the technical expert. The lead auditor is the expert in auditing. They're the expert in understanding your processes. So we can still pull in additional technical expertise as required. So we'll take a look at kind of some of these roles. So any auditor on the team, including the lead auditor, they have to identify deficiencies. At the end of the day, the deficiencies and nonconformances are one of the key outputs of our internal audit process. They're going to assist in writing the report, if not write their own independent report. They're going to discuss findings with the rest of the team. They're going to propose gradings and even grade the findings themselves. Note that auditors in training, we typically suggest do not grade any of the findings on the audit report and try to leave that to the lead auditor. But these situations with the auditors in training are not always the most common, but As you know, a bit of advice is definitely if you've got someone that you're trying to train up as an auditor for your team, let's leave the grading of the findings until they've passed whatever internal requirements you have for that auditor. Lead auditor. Really, their goal, especially in larger team audits, and I've been part of team audits with 6 and 7 different auditors. At that point, the lead auditor's role is much more of a moderator of the audit as opposed to conducting most of the work. But they're going to really review the audit findings, the reports, make sure that everything is pulled together and all those requirements are met. They audit as required. They work really hard to identify recurring trends because, especially in a larger audit, if you have multiple folks on the audit team or multiple departments to take a look at, any one single person may not see the trends occurring. On the other hand, multiple people may see various bits and pieces of what might be a similar root cause that no individual person could have seen. So this is where a lead auditor and a team audit can be very, very effective. They approve the final grade of the findings. Again, this is going to be, is this conforming, non-conforming with a minor, or non-conforming as a major? They're going to assemble the audit report and continue from there. So we want to look at some basic rules for an effective audit. Showing up, saying, I'm the auditor, I am here to audit your facility. Yeah, not a very good way to engage in an audit. Now, we've probably all had some of these from a certifying body before, probably had some of these from an internal audit before, but you want to start with telling the person why you are here and what it is you intend to do. Seems simple, seems fundamental, but this is actually very key, a very critical part of the audit is you want to make certain that they understand why you are here talking to them. So you're trying to understand the entirety of someone's business, of someone's organization, of their operations, their management system, from small conversations and tidbits of information here and there. So let them know what it is you hope to learn from them. Now, don't go in saying, I'm hoping to find problems with, this operation over here. No. You're not going to say that, but you're going to come in with really, I need to understand your job and your role here. And if you're auditing them, say in the sense of looking at the competence and training process. So you come in saying, hey, really want to understand about your position here. So you're a machinist. Okay, great. What does a machinist mean to me? Well, what are you working on? So have them show you what they're working on. They're a CNC machinist. Great. Well, how many axes is this? How does that work? How do you get the programming for it? How did you get certified to work on this machine? Yeah. Okay. Well, what other training do you have to go through? How was that training? Did they just stick you in front of some YouTube video and tell you to pay attention? Or, what was it? Was there hands-on training? Did you have to take any external certification courses? What else do they provide training on? Even if you're the training manager, these are still good questions to ask. So do what you say. So if you tell the person, I want to talk to you for the next 20 minutes, don't hold them there for an hour. You want to build trust in that audit. If you tell them that you are going to mark a finding, mark that finding. If you tell them you're not marking findings, don't have a surprise finding in the audit report for these folks. They want to know what they're walking away with. You want to keep excellent records. When I audit, I may go through 10, 20 pages of a notebook paper of notes, in addition to all the evidence that I collect. You want to make sure that you keep good notes. What exactly did they say? If you're going to quote someone for the purpose of objective evidence in an audit report, make certain you have what they said correctly on it. And even let them know, hey, I want to go ahead and quote what you said here. Can you repeat that back so I can get it exactly, please? Or could you send me an email with that same information on it, please? But make certain that there's no lack of clarity. You want to audit to verify that processes are working, not necessarily what they are. So by the time we get to the internal audit, we have developed a management system. We have implemented the management system. We've integrated it with other business requirements, other management system requirements, customer requirements. We are functional, up and running, and ready to go. At this stage, You should know what your processes are. Again, if you don't, let's go take a look at the gap assessment videos. Have a lot of fun there, but make sure you know the process that you're auditing and verify those processes are working. Again, I'm going to stress this all comes back to process mapping. What were your inputs, your outputs, your goals, measures, and the controls to help you achieve it? You want to react to gaps and seek greater understanding. Do not come into the internal audit with an agenda. I'm going to find problems here. I'm going to find problems there. It's not the case. You want to identify gaps in the process. You want to identify handovers. So let's say, for instance, you have a very complex remanufacture process that you go through. Each time that you work on a part, they came in with different types of damage, and you're trying to remanufacture it to some OEM or third-party license specification. So that means that on some of these projects, you're going to have one type weld repair. Other ones, you're going to have to do some buildup, some machining. Maybe we've got to send it for blasting and coating and, all these other operations. Maybe we need to take samples and perform our bend test and our pull test and check the metallurgy of this. Maybe we need to heat treat it, right? So you've got all sorts of oddball ways that this project could get completed versus the identical parts showing up from another customer tomorrow might go down a completely different process. So one of the key requirements here is going to be, well, we need to talk to the sales team over here. And most sales folks, when you are in audit, very confused why you want to talk to them. But your sales folks are the ones that get the requirements from the customer. What did this customer's purchase order state they wanted done? What did our proposal state we were going to do? What contract do we have in place with this customer for this work? Then you can go look at that project and see, okay, well, I can map how these customer requirements came into this. But then you might say, well, we're doing these 5 additional operations that weren't mentioned here in the purchase order. Now, for all you know, they could be a wasteful 5 operations. They could be best practices that you've learned over the last 20 years. I can't tell you, but you can find out. And that's part of what looking for gaps is. So you want to identify the handoff of one process to the pickup of the other, that all of the necessary requirements cascade over. Any of you that might have a little experience in programming, in the computer world, it's very much like a function in programming. You have a call to another function, it runs a procedure, and returns a new output. It's very similar here, but we're dealing with people and not with code. So a little different, but the same fundamental process. You want to build in continual improvement to your audit findings. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one to explain, and this really does come with practice from writing these internal audit reports. As you write the finding, you have a choice in words. You have a choice in how it's laid out and how the information is represented. So as you do so, the best way that I can explain it is you want to build in some hope of redemption for the client. You want to build it so that these nonconformities can be corrected and reacted to with a proper corrective action report. You want to make certain that you understand ahead of time that the customer, the goal is to eliminate not only the problem, but to eliminate the cause. So whatever you can do in the language and the wording and how you present this at the closing meeting, you want to make certain that this information is really well and properly conveyed to your client. Again, even if the client is Joe in the next office over because you're auditing your own company, he at this moment in time is in that role of your client. You want to make sure that you can serve him with an audit report that doesn't just hammer on the problems, but provides a foundation for continued improvement, because that's really what all of this has to be about. So that's really the end of our session today. We'll be scheduling another meeting to go into some of the details of internal auditing elements. But at this point, if there's anyone here on the live stream that has any questions, feel free to chime in with questions. I think we've got Caleb in the back end kind of moderating some of this. But while I'm waiting on that, I want to tell you just a little bit more about us with Texas Quality Assurance. What these videos are for, what we're putting them out, and what we hope to do with it is we want to do good for you. We want to help. We know that small businesses are struggling greatly. We know that almost a third of the small businesses that existed at the start of 2020 did not make it until 2021. And while there is a certain turnover rate in small business, this is 3 or 4 times higher than what we see on a normal basis. So we want to put out content here that's good and useful for small business owners, quality managers, or even if you're part of a larger organization, that is useful and helpful in your day-to-day job to just help you save time, save energy for what really matters most. All right, so we got a question here. So when a company that's new to QMS or auditing, are there resources to use as a template for the topics and the scope of the audit, or should they just go through the standard clause by clause? Fantastic question. So if you are new to auditing, it's this the first time you've ever done an internal audit. Well, guess what? All of us that audit have been there before. Yes, there's tons of free resources. In fact, we've got some on our website here for an audit report template. There's no shortage of information out there available to get yourself a starting point. Then when you conduct the audit, you can, and emphasize can, but not should, go through the standard clause by clause and audit straight against the standard. My suggestion is there are certain standard processes that occur throughout most organizations. And these can be matched against the requirements of the standard. So an example would be identifying customer requirements and contract review. It's pretty straightforward. Now you can see how those would forward into your production and service provision process. Production and service provision is a fancy word that means all the work you do that drives income. So that's production service provision. You know that you're going to have a competence and training program. You know that you're going to have suppliers. You know that you're going to have documented information. So there's a handful of standard processes that you just know you're going to have. And there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. So let's identify some of those standard processes. And what you'll find with most organizations is it's that production and service provision process that has the weird branches that kind of go out into different things they do. Like the example I used earlier, if you're a remanufactured facility and you deal with coatings and heat treats, weld repair, build up, grind fit, final NDT inspection, liquid penetrant, mag particle, like you have no shortage of areas that production and service provision process reaches out into. So whereas on the other hand, if you're just a reseller, well, it's pretty simple. We purchase, we inspect, we sell. It's a very minimal process. But both of these organizations, regardless of the complexity of their production process, they still buy things. They've got suppliers. They still train people. They still have a production and service provision. They still do quality checks. They still have these basic processes. So that would be a good place to start. Another question. How do you handle those who don't want to cooperate or try to hide evidence or flaws? Yes. This happens inevitably with at least one person in most audits. I won't say all audits, but most audits, most people are not very forthcoming with, I kind of blew it this year. I didn't really do any of that. No documentation, or maybe it was just a simple flaw and in the process and they don't want to own up to it. That's not a problem. Your goal as the internal auditor, which if we go back, several slides, that your goal as an internal auditor is to identify gaps. Your goal is to seek opportunities for continual improvement. So when you sit down and talk to that person, this goes back to talking to people like people. They're not just an auditee. They're not just a step in the audit process. These are people who do a job day in and day out that ultimately provides for your paycheck as you're the one conducting the audit. So treat them with the respect that's earned and deserved there. And really tell them, I'm here to understand your job. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And have them show you the work site. Have them show you what they do. Let someone earn a little bit of pride in the work that they do. Honor them for it. and continue to probe and ask questions and identify those gaps. And you should have a goal that you're wanting to talk this person out, certain things you want to learn, maybe not an intended output for findings, but you have a goal of what you want to learn. So make sure you can pay attention to that. All right, let's see. I think we got one more here. Should an audit team member audit their own department? No, absolutely not. It's very hard to get around and to deal with in smaller organizations. See, if you're a smaller organization, we're talking about, 50 or less people. It can be very difficult to not audit your own department, especially if you wear the hat of the quality manager. Well, the hat of the quality manager oftentimes carries operational roles, health and safety roles, inventory roles. Maybe even you're a department leader over here. Who knows? But you've probably got multiple hats, especially in a small company. So it gets very, very difficult to conduct those internal audits. And I've been on both sides of this fence before. So the first time that I ever did a self-audit of the company I was working for, I think at the time we had about maybe 100 people, 120 people in the company. And even then, because we didn't want to pull the department supervisors who were very, very focused on production. We didn't want to pull them off production for the auditor training. So the rest of the folks we pulled also wore multiple hats in the organization. And we wound up with 5 people on the internal audit team just to make sure that it was an objective audit. Now, ISO 9001 does mention objectivity in the audit, but if you take a look at API Q1, Q2, the requirements for an objective audit are much more stringent than they are 9001. So that's one of the top services that we actually provide is internal auditing for smaller businesses or smaller facilities of larger groups, because it's just so darn difficult to get that objective audit when you kind of have your feet in a little bit of everything. Let's see. Last one here. How long after QMS implementation should the first audit occur? Very good question as well. So in our standard consultation package, we have a 3-month implementation plan for ISO 9001 or any single standard. It's a 3-month implementation plan. Now, we don't expect that you're ready for the audit at the end of 3 months. What we expect is that you're going to have your documented information in place. You're going to have a process for identifying nonconformities, corrective preventative actions, competence training, and so forth. So what we do is we allow for an additional 3 months after the implementation to conduct the internal audit. And that's going to give you, and this is the answer to the question, it's about 4 to 6 months of good records. Because if you're going into that audit without anywhere from 4 to 6 months of records of training, nonconformities, document control, these basic processes, you really don't have a whole lot to audit. And pretty much the only thing your auditor is going to find are gaps. And some processes simply take time to show their effectiveness. So you do need a little bit of time in there to get that job completed. So I think that is all of the questions we have here today. So we'll go ahead and get another boot camp scheduled and booked here to talk about some of the individual elements of the internal audit, a little bit different. If you or your team are interested in making some improvements to your management system, please reach out. Let us know. You can find us at texasqa.com, on LinkedIn for Texas Quality Assurance. You can contact me directly. The information will be in the notes here. But really glad you took the time to view the video here. Really hope you can find something useful that you can take away from it. And if you have any ideas for future topics you'd love for us to talk about, please let us know. I'm looking to do a lot more content like this. This is just a real fun way to do what we can to help out other businesses, get our name out as well. So thank you very much. And we hope y'all have a great day.